Hey everybody, Nick here, and today I got a review for you of this very interesting little watch right here. This is the Omega Seamaster Diver 300M. This is the sequel to the Seamaster Professional that I've reviewed. I've reviewed an older model of in the past, and is sort of a lower end sort of thing in Omega's lineup. But actually, first, before I go any further, I want to thank my buddies over at Lewis Jewelers in Ann Arbor, Michigan, for sending this little guy along. They offered to loan this to me for review, and in fact, they did loan it to me for review, at which point I got the watch, and I immediately said, guys, you're not getting this watch back. And they said, okay, we made a little deal, and it worked out. But anyways, they've been really good to me in the past, and they can be good to you as well. They ship all around the country for Omega Bracelet, all kinds of things. And so give them a call, talk to DK, tell them Nick Shabazz sent you. They'll hook you up with some special pricing on some things, including this little guy. So there you go. Next thing, a quick note on this. What is this watch? Well, this is the Seamaster Professional 300M, I think, whatever it's called. The number for it, though, is a 210.30.42.20.00 or .01.001. That's your number for it there, but there's that. And then finally, this is going to be sort of a first impression style review. I plan to post a full review, and I don't know that it's going to be all that different than this later on once I've had some more time with it, but this is sort of what I'm thinking after wearing this guy for close to 72 hours. So there you go. Let's go ahead and jump into the good, the great, the bad, and the ugly of this very interesting little watch right here. So to start with, on the good side, the movement on this guy is great. This is the Omega Master Coaxial 8800 movement. As you can see right there, it is a mechanical watch. This is a mechanical through and through. You can see the balance wheel in the back there spinning along. It is an automatic movement, so it winds itself using that weight that you see and kind of rolling around in there, which is nice. It has all kinds of different features. It has a date window here with a quick set date function. It is a hacking movement, all those kinds of things. It is anti-magnetic, which is a part of it being a master chronometer. And the anti-magnetic to a high standard, like damn near an MRI machine sort of anti-magnetism, so that's pretty impressive. It's got the METAS certification, which is just another way of saying, yeah, it's freaking accurate, and this guy has been really accurate for me. I put this guy in the time grapher, and in all but one of the positions I tested, it was running approximately 0 seconds per day. In one of the other positions, it was -2, and you know what? That actually accords with what I've been seeing on my wrist. I'm running around negative 0.1 seconds per day, and that is really astounding. That's within the range I would expect from a quartz watch, although quartz is usually positive. So accuracy-wise and movement-wise, this is very, very impressive. That's really nice. Next thing, as you may recall, I actually recently, I had the Planet Ocean. I actually recently sold the Planet Ocean, well, traded it and then sold, because it ultimately was just too big, too heavy, etc. for me, and this guy is indeed thinner and lighter than the Planet Ocean. Originally, the Planet Ocean was 16.25 millimeters thick. Oh, I forgot to do size measurements on this guy. I'm really sorry about that. Let's go ahead and rectify that right quick. So this guy is coming in terms of its thickness, because I was just talking about that, right around 13.5 millimeters as its widest little area. The lug width on this guy is coming in right around 20 millimeters, which is actually really nice. The lug-to-lug distance on it, here, I'll see if I can measure this a little bit better. Wow, I'm just all off my game today. I knew I was forgetting something. Lug-to-lug distance is approximately 48 millimeters there. The overall width of the bezel on it here is, you're looking at 41.9 millimeters, and with the crown involved, you're looking closer to 46 or so, but that doesn't really super matter. And then the actual size of the face of the watch, you're coming in at 31 millimeters. So there you go. That's your overall size. But look, size-wise, it is actually a much thinner watch than the Planet Ocean. The Planet Ocean was 16.25 millimeters. This guy's running about 13.5. That's an improvement. This guy's running about 6 ounces. Planet Ocean was about 7 ounces. And part of that is because this has a lower water resistance. You can see here, this is a 300-meter water-resistant watch versus the Planet Ocean, which was 600. Mind you, that is not a distinction that will be appreciated by anybody at all. And barely anybody dives to 300 meters, let alone 600 meters. So nothing is lost there. But one thing that is lost is a little bit of size and weight. So that's good. Next thing, the bracelet on this guy is quite nice. So they have redesigned the bracelet now for the new generation of Seamaster Pros or whatever this is called, and it is a little bit less puffy in the bracelet. The previous one sort of had like a little bit of pillowing going on in the links here, whereas this is a little bit more squared off. It's still a very comfortable bracelet. There's no real problem there at all, but it's a very nice little bracelet. It's got the same clasp actually as the Planet Ocean. If there are any differences to it at all, I can't tell, but they are. It's a fine clasp, and it also includes a quick adjust sort of mechanism in here, which is a very, very nice thing. You can see here, I can just push this little button here, and that allows me to adjust the length of the bracelet with a pretty sizable range there, which is pretty nice. And so I like that very much. And it's just, overall, the bracelet on this guy is quite good. There's no complaint there. It's also got a fair amount of adjustability. This right now is sized for my around 6.5, 6.75 inch wrist. But you can see that I've got a whole bunch of extra links that I could pull off if this were run it a little bit too big. And that's really, really nice. They also include, as you can see here, a pair of half links. Well, you can only see one of the half links because I only got one installed, but they include two of them, and they're actually closer to a third of a link, but still. That's really nice. And so overall, the bracelet on this guy is very, very nice. Next thing, I already showed this off, but I really do love the open case back on this guy. The movement on this is just gorgeous. I'll see if I can zoom in a little bit. Oh, damn. Let's see here. There we go. So you can see here, this is just a gorgeous movement. It's beautifully figured with striping and everything. You can see the balance wheel going in there. It's a nice looking movement. And so to have that just visible anytime you want to take it off your wrist, it's a really nice thing. And it's something I've missed a lot on the Tutopelagos as well as on the Manta Ocean King. There are a whole bunch of advantages to having that open case back, most of which are aesthetic. And I really do appreciate it. It's a mechanical masterpiece. You might as well show that off, right? Next thing, the bezel on this guy. One of my complaints with the old Seamaster Pro was that the bezel was actually a little bit hard to turn. It was a little tricky, and it was a little too tense, basically. This is actually quite turnable. Is it as easy to grab as some? Because realize it's sort of just got these scalloped edges here. No, not necessarily, but you know what? It works fine. There's no real problem with it turning it, and, oh, damn, went all the way past. But anyways, it works very nicely. The other thing I'll highlight is there is absolutely no play in this bezel. It's not the case that it shakes back and forth as it did on the Planet Ocean. Whatever they had wrong there, they've got right now, and that's just great. Big a fan of that. Next thing, the price on this guy is actually more reasonable than usual coming out of Omega. Now, mind you, I'm not saying that a $4,850 price tag on a wristwatch is reasonable as sane or anything like that. No. Not going there. But what I am saying is that that is the full bill retail price. The most you should ever possibly consider paying for this is $4,850. And mind you, you shouldn't pay retail. Talk to your local Omega authorized distributor. Heck, talk to my guys. The DK over at Lewis will hook you up too. But either way, if you can pay less than retail, that's great. But the thing is, even retail isn't that bad. It's still not like value in the sense of you can buy a perfectly functional wristwatch for $10 value. But it is absolutely reasonable given over the rest of Omega's lineup, which is a little insane. You get a lot more bang for the buck here than, for instance, in the Planet Ocean, which is like $6,500. It's cheaper than the Speedmaster Pro. It's cheaper than the Railmaster, which, by the way, $5,000 for the Railmaster and $4,850 for this. I just don't get it. It's cheaper than the Seamaster 300. I mean, this is at this point among Omega's entry-level sort of pieces, and it feels really, really nice. Honestly, just impressionistically, it's a little nicer than some of their high-end pieces, and that's great. I like that very, very much. And so, and honestly, the biggest thing is this is like half the price of a Rolex Sub, which is really its most direct competition, so no real argument there. And so I'm pretty impressed with the price point. It's maybe still a little insane to pay this much for a wristwatch, but by God, if you're going to pay this much, you're getting a fair amount from it today. And Omega, don't raise the price. That's not an excuse to raise the price. It should still be going down from here. Next thing, speaking of the Planet Ocean, this has kind of been brought to feature parity with the Planet Ocean. For a while there, the 300 felt like it was a little behind the curve, like it was missing out on some things. And for instance, but now it has, for instance, a very similar movement. It's the 8800 rather than the 8900, but still still. It too is a master chronometer. It has the quick adjust too. It's got the ceramic dial, ceramic bezel, as well as the ceramic dial on here, which I'll try and show off right here, which is a very nice thing. It just feels now like they're doing the same thing that the Planet Ocean was in terms of technical sorts of details, and that's nice. And then there are some actual huge improvements relative to the Planet Ocean 8900 here. For instance, on little thing, but on the screws here, they're using a lot less thread locker now, which is nice. This was easy to adjust, which I appreciated there. They included 2 half links, whereas the Planet Ocean included 0 half links, and that's a really important thing. And by the way, with 2 1/3 length half links, that allows you to adjust the actual size of the bracelet with great precision, which can put you right in the middle of the range of this quick adjust. So that way, if you swell up a little bit, you're very easily able to adjust it. If you swell down a little bit, you shrink down a little bit, I guess, you're able to adjust that too. It's great that they include that. And so you can get a perfect fit from the bracelet and then use the quick adjust to modify, rather than being forced to use the quick adjust to make the watch fit at all. That's a brilliant thing, and it was something I really disliked with the Planet Ocean, and I'm glad they fixed it here. They've also moved to 20mm lug width, and that is, by the way, a standard width. None of this 21mm stuff. That's absolutely great. And like I said, they fixed the bezel play, so this really feels substantially like a great. It's just beautifully constructed. And so, to me, all of that is the good, is that they've made some improvements relative to your Planet Ocean, which is nice. It feels like and they brought it up to parity with it in terms of technical features. The price feels a little bit more reasonable than usual coming out of Omega. The bezel is easier to turn. It's got the open case back, a great bracelet. It's thinner and lighter than the Planet Ocean. It has a great movement, and it just overall pretty nice. On the great side to me is honestly this dial. So when I first saw pictures of this wave dial, it was like, why? No, because they show it to you and it looks like this. It looks like it's got all these cutouts going on there, and it's not that super attractive. But the fact of the matter is that this is a very dynamic dial. That sounds really cheesy, and maybe it kind of is, but the simple fact is that this looks different in every light. In many of your lighting situations, you're going to be seeing the reflections of things around you in the dial. And so that's going to make this the dial on this less of a black and more of a dark gunmetal sort of gray. It's got the same sort of chameleon character as the Planet Ocean did. And then in other situations, you'll see, the blackness from the reflection coupled with the grayness there. It's absolutely beautiful. And I think it's actually more interesting than the old wave dial was on the old Seamasters, because you'll occasionally get these kinds of vistas where it's just like, oh yeah, look at that. And then they've coupled it with a bunch of other really nice little details. For instance, the hands, which are just beautifully bent and have been tweaked a little bit, but they're good for picking up on light as well as just for looking good. You can see that they've got these nice tall raised indices here that are applied, and so you get these nice little blocks of solid lume going on there, which actually have some sort of depth up above the dial, which is great. And this watch, I'm yet to see a lighting condition in which it doesn't look interesting and different. And so I really appreciate that, and honestly, it makes it feel a little bit more premium than the other versions did. This dial is really something that, if you look at the pictures online, is not going to really do anything for you necessarily, but if you look at it like in person, I think it's going to feel a lot better. And then once you get out of the jewelry store, that's when it really comes to life, because you see different lighting conditions and it looks way better. So to me at least, that's what's great. Heck, the wife even likes this, and she's a really tough to please when it comes to watchmaking. So I really do appreciate the dial. Also the little color details, the red and the red here, just nice. And so to me what's great is actually just the aesthetics here. This dial looks spectacular, and it looks just better and better each time I handle it and each time I look down at it. So to me that's what's great here. I wasn't sold on the new wave dial, but then I got it in hand and it was like, oh yeah, that is nice. So to me that's what's great. On the bad side, to start off with, a nitpick, but certainly a thing. What the heck is this watch called? So, see, right here up at the top, it says Omega Seamaster Professional. Great, that's one name. But the problem is, on Omega's website, it's referred to as the Seamaster Diver 300M, which is different than the Seamaster 300. But nowhere do they mention the professionality of it. Is it the Seamaster Professional? I don't know. The messaging here is just kind of mixed. So, Omega, tell us what this watch is called and distinguish it from the 300, the Seamaster 300, that is, because this is just going to cause people headaches. To my mind, this is always going to be the Seamaster Pro, because it's just got those features, but I don't know. Next thing, this guy does not have an independent hour hand. When you pull the crown all the way out, the second hand stops, which means that you lose whatever accuracy you had going, and if you go to the middle position, that's the quick set for the day. The frustrating part there is if you're doing a lot of time zone shifts, you're going to lose the accuracy of your second hand when you do that. And that was one feature I really did like in the Planet Ocean, and that's the one thing that feels like a bit of a step down from the Planet Ocean in this guy. And considering that they were able to fit that 8900 movement that has that feature in the Seamaster 300, it's a little weird that they didn't put it in here. Whatever, maybe they're just trying to differentiate products or something, but I am not a big fan of that. Next thing, they were not, unfortunately, able to thin out this clasp at all, or at least they didn't try, because, unfortunately, this is still a little bit on the thick side. I mean, here, I'll measure the clasp right quick for us. This clasp itself comes in at 7.4 millimeters. That doesn't sound like that much, but if you've got this guy, for instance, on your wrist, here, I'll throw it on my wrist for a second here. That's a good idea to do, right? If you've got this guy on your wrist, what you're going to see is that this kind of sticks up a fair amount, and especially if you're like typing on a laptop or something, your wrist is going to be resting on this rather than on your wrist, and that's not so great necessarily. Not a huge fan of that. And so I'd like to see them thin that clasp out in the future. Next thing, this still has the damn helium escape valve on here. That's this little this little valve up here. Now, this is designed for people doing high-end saturation diving. Look, by the way, they do have a little red indicator that it's open. It's kind of a neat little detail. But it still has this guy on there. This is meant for high-end saturation diving, such that if helium builds up inside the case of the watch, when you are decompressing in a decompression chamber, you can open this valve and it will allow it to vent from the watch without popping the crystal of the watch off of there. The thing is, like, statistically speaking, nobody freaking needs this. This is like the province of really technical high-end saturation divers, and you are not, chances are, one of them. So you don't need this kind of thing. That said, and by the way, it still drops the water resistance to only 50 meters if it happens to be open, and so that's kind of a liability more than it is a feature. Luckily, though, we're seeing the helium escape valve shrinking. It's gone from being huge on the Planet Ocean, even on the other one, to something that's a little bit smaller, and so with any luck, this, within a few generations, will shrink off and then, like, fall off or something. And then we'll be back to a watch with just the one crown, and that's just going to be fine for pretty much everybody. It's definitely a factor. Next thing, this guy has the skeleton hands still. And look, the skeleton hands are fine. They're actually pretty attractive in many lights, but the thing is, you do need some light to be able to read them. I kind of wish that both halves of the skeleton hands were filled in with lume there, not just these little side pieces, because the simple fact is that in terms of the lume is great on this guy. Here, I'll show off the lume. I probably could have put that under the good and the great there, but I'll show off the lume here, and what you can see here is that, yeah, there's a lot of lume going on, but once you actually get into the dead of night, these little rays on the hands aren't actually super visible. All that's really left are the dot here and the triangle up top there. And what that means is that as you're trying to read the watch late at night, what you're actually looking for is the one circle that's moving more slowly than that circle, well, probably not moving at all, and is in this position. And to read the minute hand, you're reading this little guy, which could be on top of one of those little guys, and so it just becomes much more difficult to read. And that's not great. And even during the daytime, unless you've got some reflectivity going on these guys, this can be a little trickier to read. You're giving up some legibility for the skeletonization. They're iconic, I'll give you that, but I'm not a huge fan of it, and I kind of wish that they'd go with the sword hand that they were doing on some of the Seamaster Pros for a little while there, because that had a lot going for it. There was a lot of joy there. And then finally, on the bad side, I talked about how this is a little bit better value than a lot of what Omega's been doing lately, but honestly, it's still really expensive. I mean, this is a lot of money to pay for a watch, and you can get watches that are like 90% of what this is doing for 20% of the price, especially if you're willing to go quartz. Finishing-wise, they're not going to be quite where you want to be, but holy crap, still. So it feels like a good value in Omega's lineup, but this is still a whole bunch of money to pay for a wristwatch, and I'd still love to see this price come down a little bit, because it still feels a little bit like, I don't know about that. And so to me, that's what's bad here, is that it is still pretty pricey. The skeleton hands are definitely a mixed bag in terms of legibility, although they're certainly iconic and attractive. It still has the helium escape valve. They weren't able to thin out the clasp at all. There's no independent hour hand. And what the heck is this watch called? Omega Help. On the ugly front, two big issues here. Well, they're kind of combined to one big issue, I guess. It's like Voltron with issues or something. But anyways, the first one is that it is very heavy. This guy is coming in around 6.04 ounces. That's a fair amount of weight right there. And that is still 1 ounce lighter than the Planet Ocean, which was just a boat anchor. But it's still pretty damn heavy. And it's a half an ounce heavier than the current generation Rolex Sub, a full ounce heavier than the Tudor Pelagos, and there's no titanium option for this guy except for one high-end two-tone model with freaking tantalum in there somehow or another, and that's gold. It's a lot more blingy. I mean, if they had this exact, colorway in titanium, I would own that instead, but they don't, and that's kind of frustrating to me. But so that weight is definitely there, and it feels a little bit top-heavy, because a lot of the weight is concentrated toward the top of the watch here. There's some sort of there's a difference between watches where most of the weight is low and most of the weight is high, and it feels a little bit harder to control on the arm. You really need the bracelet tight in order for this to not flop around in an uncomfortable way. The other ugly part about this, guy, is that this model, the new model of Seamaster Pro here, actually got bigger rather than smaller. It moved from a 41 millimeter in the last generation to 42 millimeters, and that's just not great. It also got 1 millimeter thicker, which, well, honestly, they should have gone the other way. I remember back to my old Quartz Seamaster Pro, and it was just way more wearable than this guy is. It just felt like there was relatively little on your wrist, whereas this guy is a lot bigger. And honestly, Omega seems to be forgetting that thick is not a desirable attribute in a watch. At the rate they're going, the Planet Ocean's going to be a grandfather clock with a bracelet in like 10 years. And it's not great. This is, like I said, still lighter and smaller than the Planet Ocean. And it feels actually less tall than the Pelagos, even though it's actually similarly sized, because a lot of the height of it is concentrated down here. That's kind of underneath the bracelet. It feels a little bit less awkward in that way. But still, it's really big, and it's bigger in every dimension than the Rolex Sub, even the new Maxi Case Sub, which is just too damn big anyways. Because it's just, yeah. And so you feel this on the wrist, and that kind of amounts to the ugly here, is those two things, the weight and the size, make this a big watch on the wrist. It's heavy, it's top heavy, it's a little bit tall. It's not as exceptional in today's landscape, mind you. Probably a lot of you are sitting there like, Dick, that's not actually that thick, that's not that big, that's not that heavy, but it kind of is. I'm sorry. That's just because a lot of modern watches are freaking dinner plates that weigh 15 pounds wrapped around your wrist, and I'm not necessarily in love with that. I'm not sure that look is going to age super well. But whatever it is, that's the biggest problem that this watch, and frankly a lot of other modern watches, has, is just that weight and size issue. And if something's going to kick this guy off my wrist, that's absolutely going to be it. So, to me, that's what's ugly here, is that it's big and it's heavy, and as a result, it's way on there on the wrist. You feel this guy as you're wearing it. That may be good for you, but it's sure ugly for me. On the final, preliminary conclusion-wise here, this is a very, very nice watch. Seriously, it is. It is a technologically advanced piece. It is shockingly accurate. It's anti-magnetic. It's an improvement over the Planet Ocean, both in size and in terms of some bug fixes. They've made a bunch of little tweaks that make it more compelling. And it has a surprisingly competitive price, at least for an Omega, certainly. And you know what? Honestly, maybe most of all, it's freaking beautiful. I know some people disagree. I've heard people, the 90s are over, Omega, that kind of thing. But you know what? I love it. Maybe that's because I am a product of the 90s. Maybe that's because I was raised on GoldenEye, where this was sort of the watch. I don't freaking know. But whatever it is, to me, it's gorgeous. Even to the wife, it's gorgeous. Of course, it's not perfect. It's still got the helium escape wart going on the top here. It's still not as legible because of those skeleton hands. It's still pretty pricey, and I still do wish they offered a quartz model for people who can't do a mechanical, whether due to work or otherwise. And of course, it keeps getting bigger, thicker, and heavier when it needs to be getting smaller, thinner, and lighter. Omega's lineup, just like myself, kind of needs to go on a diet here. It's getting a little much. But what this watch is, more than anything else, is a shot over Rolex's bow. This is aimed directly at the Rolex Submariner. There is no way to look at this watch that other than like Omega is trying to take down the sub. And sure, the sub, even with this crazy new maxi case, is absolutely a little bit smaller. It's a little bit thinner, a little lighter. The hands are a little more legible, and it is, of course, the Rolex sub. I mean, it doesn't get much more iconic and classic than that. But at the same time, this watch is Omega's way of asking the watch enthusiast market, like, hey, what's making you go for that Rolex again? I think we got something better over here, and in some ways they do. Because the watch, at least to my eye, is finished just as nicely as the sub is. There's nothing I can point to on this that goes like, Rolex would have done that better. No, it's just beautifully done. And it's much more so better finished if you look at the beautiful movement in the back here, where the Rolex just has a metal case. I mean, this is just gorgeous. I mean, sure, the movement's finished, but you can never freaking see it. So that's a downside. It's also more interesting in design and dial, at least in my estimation. Some people are going to disagree, but the Rolex is very conservative. This is decidedly modern. It is just as accurate, if not more so, with the coaxial movement. The bracelet is as comfortable with a similar, although maybe a little easier to use, adjustment mechanism there. Jackass in a truck parking outside there. And you know what? Honestly, you could actually buy the damn thing at retail price rather than having to deal with supply issues, which are preventing them from being purchased. I mean, that's a big deal. And frankly, that retail price is nearly half that of the Rolex sub. And that's the big deal. It's like, okay, should I buy a Rolex Submariner in another year, or another 10 years? I don't freaking know what your budget's like. Or should I just do the Omega right now? And honestly, I think you should do the Omega. I mean, for what you're paying here, it's really, really, really nice. You are getting a whole bunch of finishing for relatively little money relative to the Rolex, and you're getting something that is technically, I think, just as nice. It is absolutely a very different watch, and I can already hear the Rolex fanboys starting up their the machine guns in the comments down below. But certainly, I mean, this at some level, it does feel a little like the sub's chubby techie cousin, certainly. But it's a really compelling watch, and I think that for many people, it's going to end up being a better choice. It's going to end up being the better watch for them. So this watch, my conclusion is that, well, like I said, when Lewis sent this to me, it was like, this is a great watch. You're not getting this back. And so we worked it out, and this way I get to spend some more time with it. If anything is going to kill this watch in my collection, it's going to be that size and the weight. And Omega has an Insta sale if they drop this guy in titanium in this kind of a colorway, or in some kind of a thinner version. I think that needs to be their next thing. But so far, after the first little while here, I'm loving it. There's a lot of good here, and honestly, I would really have trouble recommending a high-end diver to somebody that isn't this watch. So, if you're looking for a great watch with a great movement and a really unique look, I think you should absolutely consider taking the Seamaster Diver 300 for a test dive. Okay, hope this has been interesting to you, and that you have yourselves just an absolutely wonderful rest of your day, and that I conducted this review in a professional manner. Okay, bye now.